Welcome to Travel Talk with Joy, the place where I talk about the highs and lows of travel with my quadriplegic cousin. I'm so glad you're here. To start off with today, before I introduce our guest, I want to talk to you guys about a couple things that have happened recently. First thing was my husband took our 22-year-old son on a trip to Chicago. So this was like a wheel the world, multi-day trip. They went out there on a Monday, came back on a Friday, and it was incredible. So Wheel the World planned everything from food tours, architectural tours on like a riverboat down through the canals in Chicago. They did all sorts of things like doing our accessible transportation and then also our accessible room or their accessible room. And a couple of things that were really interesting that my husband told me about when he came back from Chicago was how great the transportation was. So they have the Wave Uber there. And so whenever he needed to have an Uber, he was able to go ahead and just get the Uber through um, the Wave Uber program. And we don't have this in Atlanta yet. So I was like, this is amazing. He was using his power chair there. So it was really important that he had an accessible Uber. And the second thing that was really great was they have also all their buses are accessible. So he was, they went to the Rolling Stones concert. And when they came back from that, they were able to get the bus coming home. And not all cities have 100% accessible buses. So I'm like, good job, Chicago, on your accessible buses. That was fun. I was not on that trip, but I got great pictures that we will definitely share. Second thing that kind of crazy happened this weekend was we had a big lake weekend with tons of family and friends, cousins, just so many people at our lake house, and had a great time. But we had a keg because it seemed like there were so many people that were going to be there, less waste the whole thing. Well, towards the end of the evening, some of the guys were like, well, we want to make sure that it's finished so we don't waste it. And so these guys that were in college were like, I think we need to do a keg stand. And they said, Bert, you need to do one. And again, remember, my husband's a quadriplegic. And he's like, I don't know about this. Well, they said, no, we'll make it happen. So they literally get behind his wheelchair and one person supports him in front so he doesn't completely fall out on top of the keg and does the keg stand. So when you're wondering, can a quadriplegic do a keg stand? Yes, he can with the support of about 6 people. So it was a fun time, but yeah, there's no limits. There's no limits. But today I'm really excited to introduce you guys to a guy named Ryan Davis. And Ryan is someone that I saw on social media and I was like, I want to meet that guy because he is a badass. Like I saw him walking for the first time after his injuries and it looked like hard and it looked like he was so focused. I was like, not many people choose to do that and push on. And I was like, I got to meet him. So after a little bit of Google stalking and exploring, I found him and I'm so excited he's here today. So everybody meet Ryan Davis. Ryan, I'm so happy you're here.
That's great to be here, Joy. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we are just going to dive straight into it. And if you can just start by sharing a little bit about your background from everything from like where you grew up a little bit to baseball and then how you got into the military.
Sure. Vaguely, obviously, it's not overly cool to talk about growing in Oklahoma, but it was a good childhood. It was tough. We worked outside and we played sports. And I graduated and left there in 2005 and went on to play baseball in college. And it was not necessarily something that I was enthralled to do, but there was no other way to get to college where we came from. So we as a family took advantage of that. And I think maybe my support team back then kind of like said, hey, man, stay with it. Nobody gets to go to college, especially for free around here. Keep going. So I pursued that and graduated in 4 years and got back home and started working and met my beautiful wife, Asia. Um, we can come back to that or dive into it now. Either way, we met in about 2009 and we're pretty ready to move in with each other around 11. And
Mm-hmm.
I was flipping a home. I was the product of 11 flip houses as a child. So we moved like every other year, maybe. It was a grinder when we were kids. And we got funny story. I'll remind me to come back to, but
Mm-hmm.
I took off for the Army in 2012, and Asia stayed by my side, and we did a lot of tough years apart from one another during deployments and training and the lifestyle in general, and it brought kind of maybe us closer than we would have ever became before we did something like that. And 5 years in, on my fifth deployment, 9 years in on my fifth deployment, I exploded one night doing a pretty routine raid. That didn't seem overly dangerous at the time, but a lot of things went wrong all at the same time. And a tremendous amount of heroic events kind of surrounded me to get me back home and hopefully die here on soil with my family. And everybody stayed with me and kept supporting me. And I just didn't die, and I kept coming back. So there's, like
Wow.
I said, a million different alleys in that part of the story alone.
Yes, there's so much we have to break up from there
Yeah,
first, though. Stop, stop, stop. Like you're going way too fast.
yeah, I know. Well, I'm just trying to give you an overlay, and then you can go back and dive into any part of the story that you want to.
Okay, so let's rewind and first go back to like the life of an Army Ranger. So to me, like Delta
Sure.
Force, Navy SEAL, Army Rangers, those are like the top.
Yeah.
And what is a day in a life like of someone that does that as a career first?
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely a lifestyle, and you don't really know that when you get there because you're just trying really hard to be the best, you know.
Mhm.
And each day is kind of full of training men, getting everybody ready for battle in case anything were to come up that wasn't expected, and there always was something expected for about 4 months out of every year. So the lifestyle, the faster you kind of accept the pains that you're going to have and the time that you're going to be away from somebody, you can really hone in what it is to get after bad guys in today's world. And I think the cleaner and the better special operations becomes with that, the better the lifestyle becomes for the soldier. I
Wow.
think what I mean, it's a job like none other. It's like a job you go to and everybody there is trying to be the best. So you don't
Mm.
find the collection of people like that in one room very often.
Yeah. How many deployments did you have?
5. Yeah.
Okay. And were they all to Afghanistan?
No, one of them was called IZ, which is a combination of Iraq, Syria deployment that we were going on.
Hmm. And so, was your wife supportive of like, okay, yeah, let's go be a military family, or how did that go for you as a couple?
Yeah, it kind of evolved. Like we got in and it was cool in America and there's fireworks at first and everybody's in love. And then like I'm going on deployment and she's pregnant. And like now, the real starts, the real um, kind of stressful things in life just started to grow as our patriotism was getting enrooted in the lifestyle that I was just telling you about. I think 2 years into our marriage, I had deployed twice and been to Ranger School. So, needless to say, I was not around very often at all. But it was wonderful to see Asia and Knox bond, and it kind of reconfirmed my trust in her independence to raise our
Mhm.
son when I wasn't around.
Wow. Okay, so then fast forward, and you have this massive explosion that happens. Were you
Sure.
with the team? Like, what was the team? How many people were with your team? How did that go?
I was with about 30 Americans and about 30 Afghanistan guys, and we were going after some pretty bad guys in the area.
Hmm.
Had them on the run, and everything was going fine. And as we were maneuvering, I needed to take a grenade to a hole, and I was that guy, and I was in the position to do it. So I grabbed that grenade and headed to the hole. And on the way to that hole, there was an ambush. It was a combination of explosions and some gunshots, and it left me pretty catastrophically wounded. I don't think I ever took another move from that position without anybody else. And in the moment itself, it seemed kind of surreal. I was very coherent. I was watching everything. It evolved and to this thing that I'd never even heard of. In 10 years of being in special operations and seeing tons of casualties and burying friends and going through the agonies of death as they pertain to war, I'd never even heard of some of the stuff that was done to me the night that I got injured by my good friend and medic on the battlefield that night.
I read somewhere that you got a blood transfusion on the battlefield, like
Yeah.
from, was it person
Yeah,
to person?
sure, it was. So it hasn't been done the way that we did it ever before. And it's called the Rolo program, and it's Ranger O-type low titer. And essentially what that means is if you're in shape enough and your body has givable blood, you can just take blood from you and give it to me. And when the grenade exploded next to me, because I took a enemy hit that in turn set off a grenade on my combat belt. So really there
Mhm.
was two explosions in the event as it
Wow.
evolved. And so I was very wounded, very wounded. And I was running out of blood quickly. And you know, when that happens, usually we go by a standard called the golden hour. And that means like from time of injury, you're like in front of a doctor. This is the best chance you have to try to.
Mhm.
We have measures in place where you kind of call in the cavalry and they come and get you and you go back home and doc gets you all fixed up. And we were out there for 2.5 hours, just laying in a bad spot, getting on the bad side of the enemy. And when I say so many cool things happen, I remember getting. Have you ever heard of a needle decompression?
No.
So a needle decompression is a little syringe-looking tube that you jam in between your ribs into your lung cavity to take air out of your lung cavity that's crushing your lung. So you're trying to breathe, but the air that's sneaking in there is cheating, and air gets stuck in there, and then you can't breathe with your lungs. So these guys are stamped. Like I think I did 22 needle decompressions that night until they ran out, and my good friend Ty had to do something that was very unpleasant, but the relief that came afterwards was amazing. And he took his knife and he jammed it in between my second and third intercostal under my armpit and stuck a tube in there, a big fat tube. And it was so painful and so miserable. But when that tube got in there and I could breathe again, he was my best friend all over again.
Did you go into shock?
Never. I think I lost it more to drugs than shock. I think since remember the lifestyle we were talking about earlier?
Mhm.
I think if that really is your bid, that's you're not going to run into shock that night. Maybe a little bit of surreal moments kind of set in on you as, hey, never thought I'd be the one that got hit and died. That will definitely set in on you. But
Mhm.
never did, never was I scared. If that was, I was a little let down that it had to be me, and that's part of it. Nobody's looking to die. We're looking to kill the enemy that wants to die. You know, we're not.
Yeah.
We're livers. America's are livers. Look at us go. And the way that night evolved, there was no case. It was a combination between divine intervention and combat medicine and combat lethality towards the enemy from the 75th Ranger Regiment.
So you
Story.
really feel like your military training, that mindset
Sure.
saved you. Thank
Sure.
God.
It makes sense. I've given it a lot of thought, Joe. I really have. If, let's say, it would be much more difficult for me if I was driving down the road with my son, had a seizure, got in an accident, he was fine, but I was left hurt. That would be a much higher, I think, rate of, oh my gosh, versus, hey man, you're in this lifestyle. You know the hazards of your chosen profession. This is what you do. You're the brick. You know, that mindset really helped during the injury because at the end of the day, you were there.
Wow. I mean, it's insane what you went through for 2.5 hours. Like,
2.5 hours.
Why aren't you a movie, Ryan?
I know. We'll get it there. We'll get it there. I was at the White House last week on the 3rd of July. Was in the Oval Office, and they read our story and gave us medals, and it was a beautiful thing. And it was really it was like a full circle for my whole military career, all coming together at once.
Wow.
I
How many
know.
people got that with you?
There was 4 of us in there at the time.
Is it the Medal of Honor?
One person got that one. Yeah, but we can't talk about his name because he's still working and he likes to keep it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll keep it quiet. So then what happened after? So obviously these 2.5 hours were just insane, like unbelievable.
It
And
was.
then you are taken from there. And then what happens?
After it was just suffocating and suffocating and suffocating. And then we get on to finally to the explanation of the way that we got out of there. there's definitely some meat on that story as far as the first medevac that came in couldn't get through the haze of fire in front of them, and then the second medevac ran into a fueling issue. So by the time the third medevac got there, we didn't have a lot of control of the battlefield, and he set two helicopters down. And when you got two helicopters down, 30 in one, 30 in the other, and let's go home and eat omelets, right? And the 30 running to the first helicopter got shot by a machine gun, and the helicopter started getting shot by a machine gun. So they all ran to said second helicopter. So we had two 30 packs in one helicopter, and that's just too heavy. But the fight took off anyway, and I remember that the most violent shaking. I thought it felt like we were inside of a washer and dryer. There was so much shaking going on, and I thought, I can't believe we had to do all that. Now we're gonna die in a helicopter crash. But he, luckily, this guy named Danny, who was been doing this for 39 years, and he's the best in the business, and he works for the Special Operations Rotary Wing Aircraft Unit in the Army, and he's really was an amazing dude then, and I'm lucky to have had him that night, because as we began to leave, we couldn't get enough altitude to get out of the valley, so we got shot for the entirety of coming home at daylight. Far too low, far too slow, and in the wrong area. So his heroism you can't go without saying we would be here without his part of the pie. And we go to the closest American location we have, because we've run out of blood. We've run out of people that can give that blood. And we show up, and I remember waking up for a moment, and the drugs had really set in at this point. But I do remember a long line of people, and all they were doing was giving a bag of blood to the medic. And then they cross-loaded some personnel, and we went to the closest aircraft, which was Bagram. And when we got there, the whole command space was waiting for us. We were it. An Army Ranger and a senior leader like that gets kind of caught in a very bad scenario and that much attention. I mean, we were it in the country at that point. And as they saw my chances of survival kind of dwindling, they launched a aircraft from San Antonio, and no one had ever heard of that. Everyone was like, "Why aren't you going to Ramstein?" And they said, "No, it's not looking that good. We want to fly them straight home with a team called ECMO, which basically they kind of oxygenate your blood, keep you alive, and get you back home to the States, so that you can go on and kind of tell more about that later." I guess it's like that's also kind of a thick alley to go down. But after about 36 hours, they received me and got me to San Antonio, where I met my wife, and I slept for 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
So at what point did they suture you and close you up? Was that?
So the only limb I left in Afghanistan was my right arm. And that booger was toast. I remember when it happened, the first thing that Ranger wants to do when somebody gets at him is get right back at him. So I yanked that thing up, and it was just a dangle in there. And I knew that was the first. I was like, "Whoa, that's bad!" And I yelled to a friend, "I'm hurt, or I'm badly hurt," one of the nature. And turned out that was pretty accurate.
Wow. So is your arm completely severed off on that side, or do you have
No, yeah.
somewhat of
So
still?
if you imagine your elbow and your tricep being blown off at the same time, that's really
Okay.
what happened. It was dangling by the front side of the shoulder.
Wow.
So I still could move the humerus. There was still bone in there. So I was trying to move it. I just didn't know what was missing and why I couldn't get my gun up.
So were you unfortunately right-handed?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I also saw a picture of you shooting left-handed, so I'm like, you must have recovered now, where you're a
Yeah.
pretty good shot left-handed.
Yeah. We shot left-handed and right-handed. As a Ranger, and as a, you kind of labeled them there, the Delta and ST6, you're all going to be able to shoot from both sides of your body. That's you'll have that down.
Wow. Maybe baseball helps you at some point, but having that.
I do. I'm terrible nowadays. I still
And
play with my son. I still play baseball with my son, and it's frustrating because I used to have a great arm, and now I'm throwing left-handed and doing my best.
Okay. Still doing it, man. So, okay, so you were then in San Antonio
Sure.
and they have you,
And at this point, I'm
still
like,
trying to save you.
yeah, that was pretty. That was pretty gnarly. That part was probably the worst. The waking up every day and doctor saying, "Hey, it's 30%, doesn't look good," and all your family members are coming in one at a time. And the hard part about hospital, and I'll get through this part without crying, I hope. The hard part about hospital is not being that blown up in the isolation. It's that everybody you love walks into your room just completely heartbroken,
Mhm.
and they can't hide that. So in this weird way, you're feeling like, did I just break my mom's heart? Did I just break my sister's
Mhm.
heart? You know, there was only one person that walked in the room and nothing changed, and that was my son. And he stormed into the room and he looked at me. He goes, "Dad, you don't have any legs." I said, "You're
Uh,
right." And he goes, "That's awesome."
that makes me cry. Like that
Yeah.
your
So
son was
there
like,
was
Daddy, you're
there was
fine.
strength in it. There was strength in it.
Wow. How long did it take you to physically heal? Like where you were not
Yeah, I
bleeding
think
anymore, like,
I think
and
it
where
about
there was no longer issue of infection?
I think it took about 2 months to roll over. So I was laying on my left side for 2 straight months. My head hurt tremendously. I was very sick. I had an infection in my body that was really eating away at me fast. And
Hmm.
that's not something I didn't know was going to happen. I remember coming to and from the night I got hurt and seeing indigenous forces with their hands inside of my stomach. And if you know the culture and how things work over there, their persistence to certain diseases and nasty stuff that you can get from germs is much higher than America because we have kind of a higher level of cleanliness and standards
Absolutely.
that's pertain. So like I knew that would be something to deal with, but that wasn't something I thought that I would be dealing with on the table of life and death. When they cut a little piece of
Mm.
your leg off every day and it's more dead, and they cut another piece and they start at your foot and they go up to your knee and they go up to your thigh and they go up to your pelvis. It's a very difficult scenario to try to understand, especially that quickly. You know, never did I really know about infectious disease till I got injured, and now I know what kind of miracle they can be.
Yeah. So you came back with your leg intact and they just,
Yeah, it was
wow.
shattered on the right hip, so everything on the right hip and the big elephant ear, were totally shattered. So they didn't totally know what to do, but it was staying together so that we could try to find something to do. But before
Yeah.
we could find something to do, the infection unstabilized the entire leg.
Wow. So you ended up with like a total, it's a hip disarticulation. Is that the right word?
I wish I had a hip dysartic. Hip dysartic would give me a butt cheek, but I am a hemipelvectomy, which means half of my pelvis was cut out.
So you got half an ass.
I got a biscuit and a quarter is what I call it. And my dad did say I was a half an ass by like my life. So technically I grew into what he called much earlier on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, which is better, half an ass or a smart ass? I think you're
Yeah.
both, actually. I think you're both. So obviously, like mental recovery and physical recovery, like go
Yeah.
hand in hand. Was it harder to recover from the mental aspects of your injury?
I think mental recovery is about getting stable again. And I think once you free the stability flag of trusting yourself mentally in multiple scenarios and find your sense of gratitude, I
Mhm.
think that will really pave your road for mental clarity. As far as the physical wounds go, they could, if you ever kind of come out of that good place mentally, your physical wounds, if you're this hurt, well, of course they'll set you back. You know, if you're in a good mood and you have no problem doing physical therapy and everything's going right, that's kind of an okay time to hit an injury. It's
Yeah.
when the Tuesdays when it's fuzzy and maybe you're griping with your spouse or your kid's being a brat because he's 10. There's commonalities in life that want to throw you off. But I think that the effects of, you need to make a serious direction with what you're going to do mentally and physically and stay on that track. It'll be a
Yeah.
lifestyle kind of.
So, do you think that there's like a particular moment that in your recovery process that gave you that hope and motivation, or was it when your son said, "Daddy, it's fine"? Or what was there a particular moment that you found?
Yeah, I think there was probably two moments that kind of resparked my energy level. One,
Hmm.
I could finally roll over, and I think I'm crying. I don't know really where I was. I know I was in a bad state, staring out the window, and COVID had kind of started. And when that happened, they took away all the dogs. There was no more dog to come,
Yeah.
bring me a toy in the morning, or there was no counselor to come in and talk to me. There was nobody there that wasn't life, limb, or eyesight. So I became extremely lonely, and I became extremely dependent on drugs and a bunch of awful necessities in there in the inpatient process that kind of helped me cope through that. And as I was getting off one day, and I thought this was just terrible time. I couldn't be comfortable, couldn't get off drugs, couldn't fight infections, and my nurse came in singing "Amazing Grace."
Wow.
It still gets me every
That's
time thinking about it to this day.
that's so powerful.
It was powerful. It was powerful for the soul. So the
Mhm.
soul was alive. The soul was back alive again. Now, the second thing that happened was what energized the world. And about this time, Donald Trump was in office. He was the president, and my friends were up there getting medals. So, like, I'm laying in bed so jealous. I'm not at like the White House getting medals for the mission we just did great on. And then, for no reason at all, he said, and Ryan's not here with us today. He's in San Antonio recovering, and we're looking forward to it.
Trump
Another,
said this?
yeah, Donald Trump said this in a press conference at the White House.
Wow.
And I was like, did he say my name? I was like, did that
Me?
And that was the spark that the world gave me. So the hospital was dead at that point. We were trying to stop COVID from getting in there. Nobody could come in. Nurses and staff were baseline and they were cranky, and it was a tough time to be in a hospital. And when Trump said that, everybody came in. Like the next day, I was seeing general officers, and Matt Best came and visited me after that. And he gave me coffee for my whole ICU floor, and he put Keurigs in everywhere. I know. And that was when I say the amazing grace charged my soul and changed my motivation. And I would say Donald Trump saying my name charged the world around me. And it just stimulated me with all of this fun, attention at a terrible time. And those were the two things that got me out of probably the really bad headspace that can become unrecoverable from.
So, Amazing Grace was so important to you. Is faith a big part of your journey?
Yeah, so I say that I've tested faith in a lot of ways, but and a lot of people are proud of me for still having faith, but in all honesty, I never even lost it.
Wow.
I never even questioned it. Like, to go through that and then to wake up and be like, "What?" There was not even a remote question to, is there a God? There was just, well, God, I'm kind of mad at you for this one. I suppose thank you for letting me live, and then I grew to love him again.
Wow. Yeah, I think, a lot of people, it's maybe not, is there, it's why did he do this to me?
Oh,
And,
sure. Nobody
why
wants to
was
talk
I
about
the
that. I
one?
said some mean things to God,
He can
and
handle it.
he did. He handled it. And within a year, I was up with a friend of mine in Alaska at his family's place called the Samaritan's Purse. And I got what I call a redip. And you go up there and you do rebaptized. And then that time when you go under, instead of it's like, hey, man, this is the first time you had my soul. This is, hey, man, this is the first time I've been back here to say sorry. And that's kind of what I
Wow.
did.
That's emotional right there.
I know. I know.
Ooh, you shed some tears, Ryan. So let's talk about like how friends and family obviously are important to you through this whole recovery process. A lot of times when people go through a massive injury, they have a hard time, their friends have a hard time relating to them as they used to, because especially with guys like, well, they were the guys that I played baseball with, or I went hunting with, or I did those kind of things with, and now I can't do it the same way. How did your relationships, let's talk first about your friends. How did your relationship with your friends evolve?
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good question. There's all on layer that kind of as we conversate through it. I think, for instance, I saw a lot of friends I haven't seen in years in Washington, D.C. this last week. We went out, we had drinks, we had fun, we got home. Those are scenarios that I wouldn't necessarily do with just four regular guys hanging out. I felt
Mhm.
comfortable enough to let them pick my wheelchair up and put it in the back of some guy's truck and haul down to the music joint and get drinks and hang out, and that sort of life that I would trust to them
Mhm.
is not necessarily something I'm interested in trusting with anybody today. I think
Okay.
finding friends that I can independently coexist with and that understand the difference of being somebody who scalps mountains at night and gets after bad guys, and now who is fitting into a world that he hasn't been in for 10 years and trying to be the best father and husband along the way. So your friends are definitely going to change, you
Absolutely.
know. I am
Yeah.
interested in the ones that want to grow with me, not live when we were. I will say that, I mean, if you did something as pridefully or as full of pride as I used to, sometimes you just want to sit in the garage with those guys and drink beer and not even go anywhere and not grow and not do anything and just kind of revel in the death that you barely got away from or the way that the military played things out. And nowadays, it's not that I don't enjoy those moments from time to time with friends, but it's very few and far between because I'm interested in growing with people to tomorrow. And
Mm.
there's something I've learned about not focusing on yesterday.
Mm. Uh, how has your relationship with Asia evolved? I know that a lot of people have, that's a really hard switch of, marriage to this guy, and now it's marriage to this guy, even though it's the same heart of a person. That's hard. How has that evolved?
Well, when it started, it was rough. And just to let you
Mhm.
know, I'll explain. Asia, her nickname is Rattlesnake to my friends and I for years. She was like the platoon mom that wouldn't take no stuff off nobody. Right? She was John Wayne, and we called her Rattlesnake. And she always played tough, and she never took a day for granted, but never let me get too squirrely. I grew
Yeah.
up in Oklahoma, and I'm an Army Ranger now. I can get pretty squirrely, and so she was always there to kind of be not necessarily on reins or holding me back, but there to remind me of the truly important things in life.
Mhm.
And Rattlesnake. So when I got hurt, I was crushed. I said, "You got to go." I said, I will not slow you and my son's life down. I won't do it. That's hard. That part's hard. Getting to that part is hard. And most wives, from what I hear, say yes, and they walk away. They take the money and the cars, and the guy goes with his pride and disappears into the woods somewhere, and that's okay. And I'm not saying that's not a choice that some wives. Everybody gets to choose. I had a wife that chose to stay,
Mhm.
and she's just too stubborn to leave me. So
It's rattlesnake.
she's Rattlesnake. So I finally called after she kept trying to get in every day, and I kept trying to change the password and keep her out and do all this stuff where she couldn't get in to see me because I wanted her to leave me at that point because I felt guilty. I felt
Mhm.
guilty, Joy, that I did this. This was my fault out there being a hero. What an idiot. Now look at us. I felt that. And it wasn't a feeling that I was comfortable with, imprisoning my son and wife to. So I went for it, and she denied me. Just slapped the ball right in my face. And I said, fine, then I'm going to ask you to marry me again. So I got a ring, and I had my mom bring the nurse a ring, and the nurse bring it up to me, and I asked her to marry me again. Oh,
That's the sweetest thing ever. You're making me cry a third time.
oh, the drama was so thick, but it was real. It was real life, and it was a life that she was daring to go on with me for, and we've been at it for 4 years now.
Wow. So, as someone that's with someone in a chair, when you're not in a community, sometimes disability and marriage and relationship is hard. And it's this thing of um, uh, people treat you differently. I'm always like, I don't understand how people, like, we go into a restaurant and they look at me and say two for dinner. They would have never in a million years done that if I wasn't, you know what I mean? If I wouldn't walk
Yeah,
away with my boyfriend or my husband, I'm like,
yeah,
what? And my husband is a bit like you, like a little bit of a bullheaded, often it's
yeah.
like, two for dinner, she doesn't know or whatever. Or if someone ever says like, what would he like to eat? I'm like, you better talk to him because he's pissed off right now.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's this, how do you handle that? Because your disability is extreme, obviously.
Mhm.
And, people in the community probably have a lot of questions, but they don't ask them. How do you handle it?
They do. I wish people would. The majority of people need to go through it maybe once, like the person who's overstimulated when they see us go into the restaurant and they just get up out of their chair and come over and just give me a hug, and they say, something super sweet, and I'm like, well, that was awfully nice, that was a sweet thing of her to do. And then sometimes people will come up and it almost gets weird. There's like the backside of that where people start to say, "Oh my God, I thought I was struggling today. I thought I was having a hard day," and you're like, "Oh no, you're about to insult me, and you just don't know it."
Yeah,
Like here it comes,
literally.
and yeah, I know. And then like after they say it out loud, then it's out in the air, and they're humans, and they're probably like, "Well, that sounded kind of rude. Let me go back in my car and think about that." So I think some of probably the next hundreds of years till people become more comfortable with disabilities and wheelchairs and being able to talk to people that have stuff going on. I think that about 50-50 do too much, and the other 50 just act like they didn't see you and look the other way and hope their kid doesn't say anything crazy.
What's the craziest thing? That's the craziest thing someone has said to you
On the good side or on the too much side?
on the too much side.
Too much side. The other day, I was with my son and we're at the grocery store and we're picking out food and we're going to get breakfast. We're going home, make it for mom. And in front of my son, this lady came up and she was very persistent. And I was like, okay, this is probably going to get strange. And Knox is just kind of standing there. He's 10. And she says, I thought that I was having the most difficult time with arthritis and getting old. And I looked at you and I saw I have nothing to complain about. This is the most common one that's insulting. And people don't know to say, if we all had our IQs on our forehead and we walked up to somebody with a low number and you were like, I thought I was feeling like a low IQ number today. My head was foggy. It's Tuesday. But I had a conversation with you and I feel incredibly better. So that's just a small comparison there and kind of like one you could see. But what I mean by that is if you come up and tell somebody that you were having a bad day and then you saw them and it made you feel better, that might be a you feeling and not a feeling you're having for me. So,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to get, philosophical or go into, theory of therapy and the Kroger parking lot. But at the same time, I think the mental health across the board in our nation is suffering, not just on the veteran side, but the veteran who's in the chair with a kid and doesn't quit living is kind of a magnet for people to have some realization after they say something maybe that wasn't the right thing to say.
Yeah, that was not the right thing to say. I mean, yeah, you can't think stupid. Yeah.
Sure.
Uh, I hate that. Like it's insane. Like, dude, there's so many things that you can say to someone to make someone feel good about themselves without like I make you feel good about yourself without tearing you down. Like and she had no idea what she was that she
No,
was doing something so terrible.
and you know, second, kind of socially, when Asia's with me, people will say, "I don't know how you do it," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that breaks my heart a little bit." Thanks, though. Thanks. I am right here
Yeah.
at 3 foot tall in front of you. I think if you don't exceed 3 foot in this world, people just assume your ears are like adolescents and you can say whatever that they don't understand. And
Absolutely.
and I think that as I've been at crotch level for a few years now, I think that I'm starting to understand that there truly is character involved with people that are willing to look down neutrally. And that's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so as far as your son, how have you how are you different as a parent or how do you parent him as a parent with a disability?
It's actually harder. I know when this is again like a boasty kind of all American dad versus the dad that I've chosen to become. That was easier. I could just throw him on my shoulders and throw the football a mile and play tag with him and do Nerf gun wars all over the house. That our brains are very similar. We always like to be doing something. So we connected on a much easier level back then, I think, as far as it goes as being a dad. And he was only 6 when I got injured, and now he's 10. So that evolving for any parent can be brutal. As far as the inner person goes, I'm much it's much more likely nowadays to enlighten knocks of character and that maybe being out front or the strongest or the fastest will leave you eventually with age. Not something I thought much about or thought much to parent on, but character will not leave you with age. And if you get blown up, it'll still be with you. So there's really no way to strip that from who you are. And I take more time on Knox's character today than I did when I was punting footballs a mile for him to go run and get like a Labrador.
Absolutely. I think that as parenting with disability, what I see my husband do is find things that he connects with. And so, like for my husband, he took my son when he was between the ages, I think, 14 and 18, and they went to every SEC stadium and saw a
What?
football game. Yeah,
Saturday
every
on the
SEC.
road all fall. What a stud. What a cool trip.
So I think it was 10 stadiums that they went to. I think SEC has 10 stadiums, 10 or 12. But it took them, I think it was 3 or 4, maybe it's 3 years, and COVID was a year. And it was so cool though, because our son, he's not a huge football lover,
Yeah.
but he told my husband last year, he's like, Dad, it wasn't watching the football games that was, that great. He's like, I don't even love football that much, but it's just doing that with you
Hoop,
that,
hoop.
yeah.
Oh.
There you go. There's some free advice for you.
Yeah.
But that, and then also like, so my husband quadriplegic, but we found like scuba diving was a place to connect because you can still scuba, and was cool, and the same thing with snow skiing. It was a place to connect, even though it was a adapted snow skiing, but they were able to like those could still be done as a family. So
Sure.
I think finding those trips that you can take or finding those activities that still make you go like those memories that you might have made doing other things with him, you find that way to make those memories, which are so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so, okay, let's talk about recreational activities you have tried since injury. What
I
have you
do.
tried?
I'm a big recreational therapy proponent. I like it a lot in all my ways. In the wintertime, I tag great white sharks and go skiing up in Steamboat. This year, I think I'm going to Utah with the 75th Adaptive Sports. It's going to be this year will be the first year I rebuy my skis again for the season. Meaning last year
Oof.
I rented, the last 2 years I actually rented a ski for my bucket that I've been creating. Kevin Brimble, who's like a mono skier, awesome dude who had a bad injury, fallen in on a huge cliff face, and has just had an amazing career out there. I reached out to during this process and said, "Hey, I'm a big dude. I'm strong. I still want to rip the mountain," because I used to rip quite a bit, and skiing was something I got back into when my wife skis. She's cute, you know, and I like
Oh
snowboard
yeah.
for those years. So I got back into skiing again because my wife was skiing, and I wanted to do what
Yeah.
she did and kind of be on her flow. And my kid got into skiing, so he got good at skiing, kind of all over the East Coast. And he actually had a better raising of skiing than Asia and I did. We grew up skiing out west, where you get away with a lot more mistakes and stuff. I think those East Coasters have some tight edges that they could probably learn from the
Ice.
West. Yeah, yeah. So Knox became a pretty good skier. And for 30 days after I got back to Savannah from Walter Reed after the third year of the recovery, I said, I got to go to the mountains for about 30 days. And Asia's like, are you crazy? I'm like, I need to go there. I don't want to be on any medicine. I want to drink coffee and smell mountain air and just breathe my own air for a second. And I went there and I kind of reached out to the few friends that I had in Steamboat and told them my plan. I was going to stay at this hotel that was pretty close to the mountain, and I had a place for my car. And so I drove my minivan up there and pulled a trailer with all my stuff in it for 30 days. And it was invigorating to go out west again because I used to love those
Mhm.
trips. So 70 out there, and there goes Kansas. And those trips have kept a lot of energy in my system, and I needed that one to kind of really think about some things and think about them early on the face of the mountain when nobody was there, and not let those answers come to me in cell phone form, but come to me in the heart.
Wow. Wow. So did you find your answers?
I did. I did. I was skiing one day, and I had a guy kind of following me around. They weren't like totally okay with me just ripping around the mountain by myself. So I was onto the mono ski at this point, and I was eager to be by myself. But I took a fall by like one of the posts that holds the chairlift up, and it had a pad
Mhm.
on it. So I just kind of relaxed there for a minute. And I was just kind of enjoying this moment. And the sun's coming up perfect on the valley, and it's one of those days it's going to be
Mm.
beautiful. And I'm on like a good view spot, and I hear the sound of skiers in the distance, and I hear the same birds and chairlift noises I've heard my whole life. And I'm laying there in this kind of like weird position. I'm like, does this suck? Does this not suck? And then it dawned on me that I was never there to ski. I was just there to realize that everything was still the same. And just because I was different, the world was
Wow.
still the same. And that's what I got out of that. Nobody was against me. It wasn't out to get me. Simply the sounds you hear under a ski lift. Cry number 4.
Stop counting.
Yeah.
That is powerful
It
that like
was. It
the
was.
world's still turning.
Everything's still happening the way it's supposed to. The sun's getting closer to the valley. The kids are still out of control. Snowboarders are getting high in the forest. Same thing going on that always was.
Dang.
Hmm.
That's a big moment.
It was. It was. And I think after, and that was probably only maybe a week into my trip. And I called Asia right when I got back. I'm like, where are you guys? Are you coming up here? When are you going to get here? So she came up the next weekend, stayed for a few days with Knox. I actually ended that trip at probably 26 days
Hmm.
instead of 30 days because I was eager to get back to life. I was like, I had like found this circuit that had been missing. And when I plugged it in, everything made sense again.
Wow. Whew. Sometimes I think like getting back to nature like that, like the simplicity of that,
Yeah.
really like so much clarity than when I'm thinking of when you probably would have been back in Savannah and the
Yeah,
busyness of just, normal life when you don't have those moments.
sure.
Wow.
Being bedridden was very difficult, and the same way that you're bedridden today, you'll use your phone for like 6 hours that day. You'll just be in your phone working and scrolling mindlessly and catching up on emails and trying to set up future business. You'll be doing so many things on your phone that it's almost kind of distracting you from doing things on yourself.
100%. Absolutely. So you obviously love skiing.
Yeah.
Um, do you love shooting, or was that just like a one-time picture I saw?
I like shooting. I used to be really good at it. I got like super blessed in my career and got to go to all these super cool shooting classes. So it's not like I was
Mm,
like born like Wyatt Earp or something, just blasting people. No, I went to these courses that special operations paid for me to go to and come back and train people. So I shot a ton and I was really good at it. And almost every range I went on, I could be in the top three shooters at the end of the day for sure. And
wow.
nowadays, when I go shoot, it is fun to get out there and smell the gunpowder and see, some metal fly and show people like, hey, man, that one armed left handed shooter dude shoots pretty good, you know? And it's fun because I get recognition from an old life from it. But it would be like Babe Ruth going out there when he's like 60 and hitting a home run just for the crowd and BP or something. It's not necessarily something
Yeah.
I'm in the industry of anymore. Everything I know about shooting right now, I will never need to know anything else about shooting as long as I live. So I'm thankful for becoming handy with the steel like the unit taught me to be.
Yeah.
Uh, but now I don't go out there and show it off to kind of, it's different. It's one of the things that strikes me more different than I want to pursue being better at.
Mhm.
You know, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily that I don't like it. It's just I don't want to chase that around to be a third of that in which I hold
Yeah.
my mind of what it is.
No, it definitely makes sense. So have you traveled much since you've been injured or since recovery?
Oh, if you only knew, if my bank account could talk, woo, we travel. We're travelers. We cruise. We travel. My family likes to be on the go, and luckily we can be in our scenario, and that's not always easy.
What's
Um,
the most important thing for you when you travel?
oh my gosh. Like you said earlier, the chair is definitely the most logistics that I've run into at this point in the adult game to getting the heavy chair where it's got to get to. Um, that can be kind of a nightmare in and of itself, right? Getting a power chair to your location, having transportation once you get it there, getting it to dinner every night, getting it out of dinner those sort of things go into the way that we plan vacations nowadays, just so it's easy.
You find
Um,
cruising easier because of that?
yeah, I think anytime you do anything where your restaurant, your hotel
Mm.
room, maybe your cocktail lounge, all on one level surface or elevators to get you to and from with no vehicles, that can be much more enlightening than it used to be, right? If I would have gone on cruise 5 years ago, I'd be like, a lot of people in here, a little stuffy. This is weird. Now I'm like, I'll take this every day. This every day.
No, I totally agree. I'm like, every restaurant's accessible. It's amazing. Yeah. No, you even get
Everything,
preferential
yes.
treatment. Yeah.
And the world doesn't know that really. When I tell people that, they're like, I wonder what he means. I'm like, there's elevators everywhere. I can get a
Yeah.
handicapped accessible room. I got a view if I want to be away from people for a minute. I got a porch. There's so many, there's kind of that to roll that up for the whole family and I. It's a player right now for sure. My son is 10, so he's super social like his mom and dad. So he's always wanting to go to kids camp and play at the early
Um,
basketball and
it's perfect. And then it's also the thing of you don't have to be every time like packing and unpacking, packing and unpacking. of doing all the, I don't know how much equipment you like to bring, if you use a shower chair, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, and two legs and an arm, but it's just you unpack once and it's lovely. I used to not be as big on cruising, and now, especially like using a power chair and stuff, it's just so much easier, and it's just like you can relax, not have to worry about the next thing.
Which is nice.
Absolutely. As far as when you go, do you always do a roll in shower? Like, what is your preference as far as accessibility that
Um, I would rather have a roll-in shower, to be
way?
honest. But if it's a deal breaker of like not having a patio, I would rather
Mhm.
have a patio. So, be it for me, I kept falling in the shower when this started out. I kept falling in the shower because I have just enough nub to try to do enough by myself. And it just kept becoming my battlefield. It kept becoming where I was losing, and I'd tell my aides to go, my wife to go, and I'm to get this shower figured out, right? And I kept falling. I kept losing to it. And I'm at therapy one day in San Antonio, and this other triple walks in, and he was like a very lucky triple. He was like two femurs. I think he was a bilateral AK, and he was missing his hand. So he was
Mhm.
way more of a triple than I was. But at the same time, I was like, dude, how do you not die in the shower? And this guy was from like, I don't know, Alabama. And he was like, well, get on out of your chair and just sit on the floor. And I thought, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, but it totally takes my enemy out of this fight. So I learned showering independently from the floor. And then I
Yeah,
started to add on things as we safely got to move forward with the idea of total independence. So it's hard. It's hard
yeah,
to when you're trying to pursue a life like that, and you run into adversity, and that comes with pain or humility. Those can be lessons that are hard on you, and you get
absolutely.
a lot out of those lessons. And the forgery on the other side is massive, but I've had the ambulance in the when I was way too way too early on in my recovery to try to shower alone. I took a bad one, and nobody was at the house, and then the ambulance showed up, and it became such a daunting moment in humility for me based on my own ego. And you know you're going to have those if you're going to take the kind of jump that I took, like mountains every night in the middle of the night, getting after bad guy, to laying in a bed for a couple of years. There's going to be some of your directions that are off, that you just need to reassess and identify as the person you are now, the power you have now from both those people. You know, that's where your power.
Mhm. Do you find that finding, like you said, you made that triple amp, do you find peer support through other people that have been helpful, like that man?
Yeah, I think that there's a sense of knowledge gathered over time. I think just time in and of itself, if you do something for long enough, whether you pick up fast or slow, you still know the answer because you've been a triple for 12 years. There's things that we can pass on to each other in this lifestyle. If you are kind of like me and you're just baptized into it all of a sudden, that can be overwhelming, and you're just like, all right, let me batten down, like not falling out of my chair. I'll worry about like not dying in the shower later tonight. There's a lot of things you're trying to catch on to at once, and when you get just the smallest, less dangerous scenario for you to put one in for a while, um, I think that until I got my back flap surgery into 2021, I would not wouldn't do much showering alone.
Mm, yeah. I met a guy recently who he actually won a giveaway with Wheel the World to South Africa. He was a quadruple amputee, or is a quadruple amputee, and he found an organization that it's all for bilateral upper extremity, and then some of them have lower extremity too. And it's amazing the teaching that he learned. Like they have a clinic that they do like every other year. And he's like, I learned so much just like from that one clinic, just because there's
Sure.
people that are like that are like me there. You know what I mean? They're living it. um, when you think of like personal and professional goals for you, obviously you're an Army Ranger, but like what made you an Army Ranger was all your intrinsic amazingness that translates whether you want to go into finance or go into business or whatever. What are you thinking for yourself for um, future future interests?
Well, I think that's a good question. I've actually kind of almost got this verbal. We retired in October, and I wrote a book called Rattlesnake about an American tale. Yeah, I know. Here we go. Cry number 5 coming up. Get ready, everybody. It's a tale of resiliency an American couple went through. I'm not trying to take credit for anything or take away from the heroism that is just at the corner of every one of my stories. But I just wanted to write a book and kind of professionally put something out there so people will have a better understanding. And, I've taken a few professional speaking jobs now just to basically
Mhm.
just to tell a story. I haven't really even had an opportunity to talk about a message or to talk about a direction that I think people with accessibilities need to hear, or veterans need to hear. I've just told a story. And in that story came a book and a website. And I feel like it's something that I want to do for my wife, for myself, for the Army, for the country. I think probably be done by Halloween. I sent him, really, it was a collection of a journal I kept the entire time.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
oh, you thought Cry 5 was bad. Going to that, it was like Cry 500.
You
And
needed that
I
though.
had a woman at a local press go through it all with me and help me write it down and help me understand.
Wow.
And she said some of the moments that I was like, you don't want to hear about that. And I would read it to her and she's like, that's huge. That has to go in the book. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yes, people will want to hear those stories. And so I wrote it all down, and now we're connecting kind of the careers where Asia and I were, before each deployment and after each deployment. We're kind of putting in the filler in the middle of it right now. So hopefully it'll be out enough that, if in the future, hopefully people will have an understanding from a book that we wrote kind of as a family, more so from a dark tale of the hospital or my perspective as a family.
Absolutely. Um, I think that, so many times people that write a book that stems speaking engagements and then just opportunities. I look at someone with your story and yes, you have this amazing story, like, dang, like that's a purpose right there. But you are only, how old are you? 30,
7, yeah.
37. Like you're
That'll
young. You have a long life ahead of you
Oh yeah.
and so many people that you will touch. Um, what is something that's unexpected that you've learned from this journey?
Um Unexpected from this journey. I did not think that I would be able to love the way that I can love today. I didn't see that being possible. And I don't necessarily mean physically, though I'm thankful for that too, but I'm thankful for the emotional connection that I can be vulnerable to that enlightens a sense of happiness. So you can only get so happy unless you turn it all out inside out to your spouse, your partner, your loved one, your kid. You can only get all the way there if you totally let go with them. Totally, your
Mm,
bond is thick as thieves, like the little tail thing in Avatar where they connect. It's just like that in real life. But you have to let go of what that shit that's bothering you, that shit that's on your phone, that stuff that's in the way of every crack trying to stop you from being happy. And when you let go of that, the world can transcend and you can bond closer with your loved ones than you ever thought possible. And for 10 years of marriage, 8 years of marriage, and 6 years of Knox's life, I never let that security down. So the unexpected resiliency I got out of that would be you're actually stronger when you let go of things.
Wow. That is, I'm sure, unexpected. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people wouldn't have thought that at all.
Yeah.
So you obviously are someone, you're a risk taker. Just by nature, you're a risk taker for sure. You take risks in sports still. You take risks with travel. And what would you say to people out there that are like, I just don't want to take that risk of travel, or I can't take a risk of travel. I'm too fearful. Because I always say, like, the number one thing that people say is, I don't want to travel because I don't have the money. And I get that. But the second thing people with disabilities say is, I don't want to travel because I have fear. How would you encourage people to get over that fear and take that risk and take that leap to try things?
My encouragement to you on the front side is that fear is if you're scared of something, 95% chance it is not that something that's scaring you. It's something you've built in your mind as your worst case scenario. And that is a brutal wall to get over. Brutal wall to get over. But when you do get over that, and when you say, you know what, if my screw pops off my leg and my leg falls off today when I stand up to pee at the restaurant I go to with my family, so be it. So be a scenario that I can go through. Because whatever scenario got you into this is always going to be harder than something you're scared of on a vacation. The first vacation I went to, I didn't even know what to be afraid of. I got to Miami and my chair looked like a smashed Coke can. It was destroyed. I had the whole trip in between one of the scooters in Turks and Caicos and my wife and son helping me everywhere. We never had more fun on any trip we ever went on. So
I love
it was
that.
like project one. It was like first time out of the country, chair destroyed. Like good luck on this giant scooter that like, you know, grandma and grandpa take around the resort. Like, you'll be fine. And I could like hardly sit up. It was insane.
That's terrible.
I'm telling you that that great fear was rewarded with what comes on the other side of that. Face that fear and go out there and enjoy it. And I swear it'll be the sweetest enjoyment you've ever had, because anything worth something is going to taste much better than something worth nothing. So if you can just go outside and nothing scares you, that's okay. But if you're scared, I get it. I was scared too. I was scared shitless. I was an Army Ranger that knew how to kill people a bajillion different ways, and I was terrified to get on an airplane. And what happened the first time I got on an airplane? Delta was using that weird aisle chair thing you got to use, and when we were transferring out of it, like a sack of potatoes on the floor. No legs, bilateral at that point, no legs on. Just had surgery on my arm, so I'm like a one armor going home for a kind of a last minute hurrah party for one of my friends in Savannah. Dropped on the airplane. That was my biggest fear. I was like, well, here I am, rock bottom. And you know what? I got up and I made that trip work, and I never recharged batteries so well than pushing through something difficult and getting to the light on the other side.
Dang. I love your your resilience, your passion. Like, you are an incredible person. You're so incredible. And I know you were incredible before, but I'm like, no, like, you're probably a better human now.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I mean, man. Okay. So I always end with little popcorn round questions that we didn't get to, that are really just like getting to know the core of who is Ryan Davis.
Cool.
Okay, here we go. 10 things. Your favorite country you've ever been to?
The United States of America.
Yes, sir.
Outside of that, probably Turks. That grew on
Okay.
one of my favorite destinations today after that trip.
Most important thing to bring when you travel?
Wheelchair charger. You forget your phone charger, chances are the gas station has one. The chances are they do not have an iBot charger. It is very likely you're getting one of those.
You're screwed. You're lucky you got the iBot. That climbs stairs, right?
Yeah, I don't do that. You have to trust your wife to do that, and we don't play those games. We're too emotional around here to be putting lives in each other's hands like that.
Last great book you read.
Say that again.
What was the last great book you read?
That's a good one. Where the Crawdads Sing, I think. What's the last book I read?
It's a good one.
It was.
I already know the answer to this, but mountains or beach vacation?
That's a tough one because my family likes beach and my soul likes mountains more. Goodness. I would say mountains because they're more accessible.
Absolutely.
You know?
Favorite band?
Ooh, wow, that's a tough one.
Or a singer?
Right now, say that again.
Favorite band or singer?
Geez, it's something country, but it's also something bluesy. Band of Heathens, maybe. I like that new country direction that's kind of like Tyler Children and all those dudes coming into the scene. And I also like, what's his name? Who's kind of got this country vibe going on. Tattoos, Post Malone. He's got a country thing going on right now. He's doing with like Chris Stapleton and other dudes.
Yeah,
It's
Ian
fun.
Jelly Roll.
It's fun to kind of see everybody get into that. Tab Bennett's one of my favorites, and all the way back to like Louis Armstrong.
I just went to Tyler Childers, and that was the best country concert I've been to in so long.
It's good. I've heard good things. I've heard good
crushes
things.
it. And it's not just the way he sings, it's his conversation with the audience and then his set. Yeah. Like most country singers are like, I'm just getting up here with the guitar. I don't need a set. Like his is like a set that you would see like at a Rolling Stones concert or something.
Yeah, like a real show. Cool. Like somebody just
so cool.
It. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Essential snack on an airplane.
Snack on an airplane. Me and my son are addicted to Sour Patch Kids, but
there you go. Best gift you bought your wife.
Best feature about my wife.
Best gift you bought your wife.
Oh, I was about to say, wow, that's bold. Best thing that I bought my wife. You know, in the accessible world, you leave marks on the ground. You do. There's no way to get it. We have 4 wheels. Sometimes I have 6 wheels. I'm always out somewhere. I'm not supposed to be risking it and getting muddy. And what I can clean off, I do. And we have these beautiful wood floors that Gary Sinise provided in these homes. They're beautiful. They're immaculate. The grain is like you can see it from where you're standing way up here. We're sitting halfway up there. You can see every wheel mark because the grain is so thick that it kind of really makes the wheel mark show. So I bought my wife these little, let's see if I can see them, little Skynet robots that drive around and sweep up and mop behind it.
Because this is amazing.
I know. This is the only gift that I've ever done this with. Usually I'm like, I go to like the jewelry store and I'm like, give me something flashy. I got to show her off. But this time I wanted to do something from her. So my love language is evolving after my explosion. You know what I mean? I don't just want to put some nice earrings on and dress her up. I want to help her.
Yeah, that is an excellent gift for a wheelchair wife because we do more. You know, we do more. And anytime someone does like acts of service and like thinks, how can I do something that's going to help her? That is a great gift.
Yeah. And they get a little bit annoying whenever, like, she'll turn them on here in a little bit, but they'll follow me around. They follow your tracks. So, like, it's constantly following my track on the ground. So I'll, like, go to the bathroom in there and, like,
oh my gosh,
over there. And I'm, like, watching this Roomba, like, get up under my chair. I'm like, you sabotage this. You're just here to ruin the party, aren't you?
I think I need one of those.
I
know. Okay. We're going to pause for 1 second because you said about the Gary Sinise home.
Yeah.
And I looked at your home online, and that was the most beautiful home that he provided. When did you move in?
He did. He does. he's like set the gold standard for homes and disabled veterans and that whole platform. He probably still provides the most robust home to all of us, all of his choices. I think he's 103 homes now, and of all the things he did for us, I appreciate his care the most. He cares.
Hmm,
He writes notes. He sends texts. He remembers birthdays,
that's crazy.
anniversaries. Like this guy is like a big deal, and he has time for just little old us living out on the marsh in Savannah. And he's stayed with us, and he's been a resource for us when Asia and I are about to tear each other's heads off 2 years into our new marriage. He was there for us. He gave me tons of resources when I was in the hospital, to include Travis Mills and his organization. Whenever Gary has his arm through with you through the process, you can feel his touch. And that's not
Wow.
often when you're working with an organization so large.
And also working with someone that is like the figurehead. Usually the figurehead gives the money and then his people do the rest of it. That is incredible
He is,
that he's involved in his organization like that.
yeah. Um,
Wow.
when the house comes, it's really overwhelming. It's difficult to almost even explain, but we're living on post in this tiny rat dump, like 800 square foot thing for my family to be in until we're out of the military, right? And Gary kind of sees our scenario, and we submit a few videos that you like can't do a full circle in the kitchen with your wheelchair,
Mhm.
and like all these damages to corners that I've done. I think I ate like some of those crown molding corners completely out of the
Of
drywall.
course you did.
I think just trying to go too fast or chasing Knox. And Knox and I were having a Nerf war one day, and they saw how cheap our doors were. We were having a Nerf war one day, and I'm chasing him through the hallway in my chair, and he runs in his room, and I'm right behind him, and he slams the door. And
Mhm.
I couldn't stop the chair because he was at the end of the hallway, and it blew through the whole door, like broke the fiber, that little tiny cardboard door directly in half. It looked like Barney Rubble just blasted through the side of the house. It was something Knox and I'll never forget. The guy was like, "What happened? Is there a domestic dispute?" And I'm like, "No, man, it's not. We were Nerf fighting." Anyway, to go into a home built as well as this, with big heavy doors and AC that works, and not even to mention the entire house was furnished. There was food in the
Wow.
fridge. There was towels in the cabinet. There was soap in
What?
the bathroom. There was food in the fridge. There's probably the healthy food's probably still in the fridge, but there was food everywhere.
That's
And
crazy.
it was crazy. It was crazy. And then they're here and we have a party in the front yard and they give you an iPad. And by noon that day, they're gone. So there's this weird, like, super height. And then it kind of comes back and you and your family are just sitting there and you're like, can you believe this is our house? And my son's just like biting into some fancy cheese that he found in the refrigerator. Like, we have no clue how we're living at this point. Our standard had been in a hospital, a crappy place on post, and now Gary came through with this, and it totally changed our perspective. I'm actually kind of glad it sucked there for a little while, for a little bit of humility and gratitude for the Davis family, because we are spoiled right now.
Wow. When did you get this?
October.
Oh, like just last October.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. What a gift. Like that's literally like I never heard about this program until I did a little stalking and I
Yeah.
saw your house and
Yeah.
I just thought, oh my gosh, it's gorgeous on a big piece of land
It is.
and
It is.
unbelievable.
When you pull up to the house, the coolest thing I like, man, when you pull up to the house outside and you look at it, you're like, that house is the most America thing I've ever seen. It's like blue. There's a big flagpole.
Oh yeah.
it's very of what I wanted my home to look like someday. So I'm glad that they captured that. On the other side of that, we had a house in 2019 when I exploded. We had a 2-story, and a wonderful organization came along called Army Rangers Lead the Way, and he was a Gold Star father and stepped right in my absence and helped my wife pay, our mortgage there on that home until she could get into position to sell that home because it was a 2-story home that had very little adaptability. And
Mhm.
so, in the midst of me being in San Antonio for 2 years and Walter Reed for 1 year, Asia moved to San Antonio for the 2 years that I was there. Knox came down a couple months after Asia did. As soon as I was kind of in the clear of like, okay, he's not going to die tomorrow, or at least the chances are below like 20% that he's going to die tomorrow. And it was kind of on the up and up. Did I ever tell you how that happened? I think I need to
No.
come back to that. Rattlesnake, who is tough. We know this. I'm dying. Can't stop this infection. If they cut the next day, it's going to be my descending aorta, and that's it. It's over. Done deal. And Ada's like, well, if you're just going to cut him up, he's going to have such a miserable time in life in general. Maybe we should start talking about quality of life on the other side. And the doctor says
Mm.
there's one more thing we could try. And Aja says, what is it? She goes, it's not approved and I can't get it. It's in Japan. And she goes, but I know who can get it. I said, who? And she said, who? And she goes, the president and all the generals, all the general officers. And she had seen this steady flow of general officers in my room since President Trump has made that comment. And they all left numbers with Asia. So Asa picks the first number up and calls this guy named General Clark, and he answers. And him and Asia get to kind of talking back and forth like, hey, look, the doctor here says there's a drug that exists that you and your friends can get, but we can't order. Clark says, I'll have it there in the morning. It was literally there in the morning, stuck it in my arm, and it was neon green, and it said not FDA approved for experimental use only. And I was like, I'm dead. This is it. this is how it ends. And literally my white cell count went from 11,000 to like 150 the next day, like instant antibody relief. I think it was an 11-day platform, and my hemoglobin was totally back to normal.
Oh my gosh, that's
Insane,
insane.
insane. And I'm like, well, that's what you get. You put up with the strains of Asia's loud mouth on my time. I get the reward of Asia's loud mouth when I'm dead in the bed. That's,
Yes. And the idea that all happened because of that one event of Trump saying your
yeah,
name.
isn't that wild? Because when the commander in chief is when he comes in and he says things, generals are going to want to listen. They're going to want to understand their boss, and they're going to want to see these things. And I was in such a high profile incident on the battlefield at such a high level that they just wanted to come in and kind of talk about it and hang out.
Wow. From the time you were originally injured until the time you were like completely discharged from everything and was just like an outpatient doing prosthetics, how long
Yeah,
did it take?
I would say the first one was about 6 months. And then I could go home to bed. Now, I couldn't really get out of bed, and there was a lot of wound care still involved. There was um, giant craters in my back, the size of your whole hand, that had to be cleaned out every day. And
From
it
what?
was
Why did you have the ulcers in your
craters
bed?
from
Your
because when
back?
my
Yeah.
body blew in half, when that whole side went, the whole abdominal block blew in half as well. So there was nothing over there. So we were just trying to pull
Wow.
skin together for 6 months with wound vacs and trying to sew it up. And I got to a point where we could put donor skin on there and it would hold. It kind of looked like chicken skin. I was okay with it. I could go home. My wound would be closed enough to go to my couch and recover versus this hospital bed. And this one's gonna make you cry maybe, but I went home and it was before Christmas, maybe a day or two. And this is of from August to December, and I'm like there, and I'm like, I really feel some pain. This is weird. I'm hoping that since I've like dialed back all these drugs, that maybe I'm just feeling what this might feel like. And it got to a point where it was not supposed to feel that way. I was sickened by the pain, and I went into the doctor, and he said, "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing." And he took a CAT scan of my back, and he found osteomyelitis had eaten my L5S1 and was still active. So I had to go back into the hospital and face down for 90 days for that surgery. So I went from that tiniest sliver of a few days of freedom before Christmas to the slamming door of face down in a hospital bed for 90 days.
Oh my gosh.
That was
That, and like how you recover mentally of that, like, and didn't just be like, I'm out.
It hurt so bad.
Wow.
So bad to go back in there. I
Did
wasn't
you end up?
scared to go back in there, but I was twice as motivation busted because I mean, look, I was scared the first time. I didn't know what was going on. I was dying all the time and immaculate surgeries happening around me. I didn't know what to be fair or what to be scared of and what not to be scared of. Now, the second time I went in, I knew exactly what to be scared of, and I kind of wasn't choosing fear, but that could not see past the burden of having to be bedridden in a hospital again during a pandemic. I wouldn't put my enemies of war there.
Yeah, the worst time to be hospitalized for sure. Did you end up having to have a colostomy because of all your internal damage?
No, my colon was really, really damaged there for a while. Never really lost that opportunity. So never had an ostomy.
Man, the idea that you are here is obviously a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, your story is to be told. Like that's why I'm so grateful that you came and told it with our community here. But like it, you're going to affect countless people, and it's I see from my husband's own story where it's like he's affected countless people with disabilities, and he's been in many weddings of people that have similar disabilities because that when you're able to share your story, it just creates so much more of a bond with you, that person that has the same disability. But it's the amount, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that you're going to affect over your lifetime. That as an Army Ranger, yes, you're a badass Army Ranger for who knows how long that would have lasted. But what you're affecting is going to have this exponential effect in your life, and it's infinite. You're young, and it's going to be amazing. And I know, like, days suck, they do, and it's okay. Tomorrow's going to be a new day, and I can already see, like, you just have that attitude of, yeah, it might be crappy one day, and the next day it's like, okay, you get up and start from square one again. But I just appreciate you so much, and appreciate you being full on with your story and telling us everything. And one day I'll come eat rattlesnake.
Please do.
And we will come for dinner in Savannah.
Please
because man, like you guys are incredible people, cool people to hang out with, have a bourbon and some barbecue. Yes. Okay, now we're going to end here, but I'm going to need to tell you one other thing first, like to make sure we have all of our everything's uploaded. So don't, when I say, okay, we're done, don't go away. Okay. Okay. So thank you, Ryan, today for being on Travel Talk with Joy. Guys, tune in next time when we have Paralympic athletes coming your way. Paralympics are coming up just 2 weeks after the Olympics, and we're excited that we have some of USA athletes here to share their stories. So we'll see you next time on Travel Talk with Joy. Happy travels.